the underlying mistake that we're forced to think is that science and rationality are coextensive when they're not.
And also that there...
That is to say, science does not cover the full field of rationality.
No, history is a rational discipline. So is
there
philosophy.
Are other kinds of sciences, and this is what my PhD was about.
It's Michael Behe, it's John Lennox, and it's Stephen Meyer, and they're discussing 4 big points. This is part of a longer conversation, but they're going to get into the limitation of Darwin's theory, intelligent design and the evidences for it, the fact that ultimately the atheist viewpoint makes a philosophical claim before it makes any scientific claim, and then lastly, they answer this question from sort of more of a structural, systemic perspective. Where did these blinders come from that so many people seem to have on? So there's a lot in this video. It's worth watching all the way through. With that being said, let's dive in.
When Isaac Newton developed his wonderful law of gravity, he was asked, what the heck is gravity? And he said, hypothesis non fingo.
Yes.
I feigned no hypothesis.
He had no mechanism.
He didn't have a mechanism. What's the mechanism for the Big Bang?
Nobody
I don't
knows.
know. What's the mechanism for radioactive decay? I don't know. So there's lots of things that happen. People don't know what the mechanism is, but we see patterns and we can deduce explanations from the patterns.
Okay. I'm going to quote you, and I begin by quoting someone you quote. This is more Behe here. Biochemist Franklin Harold, in his 2001 book, The Way of the Cell, quote, "We should reject as a matter of principle the substitution of intelligent design for the dialogue of chance and necessity, but we must concede that there are presently no detailed accounts of the evolution of any biochemical system, only a variety of wishful explanations," close quote. And Michael says, well, to begin with, that's quite a breathtaking concession, and congratulations, the science has moved along enough to recognize the limits to Darwin. And then Michael continues, Harold never spells out his reasoning, that is to say, why we should reject intelligent design in principle, but I think the principle probably boils down to this. Design appears to point strongly beyond nature. All three of us are down for, everybody's down for that. It has philosophical and theological implications because some think that science should avoid a theory that points so strongly beyond nature, they want to rule out intelligent design from the start, close quote. This is the question of drawing lines. And I pose the question to Michael Behe, what the heck is wrong with that? We just say, science goes as far as it goes with our 5 senses and what we can reason therefrom. And when it hits a dead end, it says, dead end. Okay, well, you haven't got it. Radioactive decay, gravity, don't know. Go ahead. So what's wrong with drawing these very sharp lines? Why do you want to include intelligent design in the scientific enterprise?
Well, for a couple reasons. First, if scientists claimed that they did not know how life developed, that would be good with me. That would be a step in the right direction because they don't. Unfortunately, people pretend that they do. On the other hand, we can tell, we conclude design, we infer design from physical evidence. It's not from some, vision or anything that people have. If you look at a mousetrap, you can tell it was designed, and you can tell because you see how the parts are arranged, what the relationship of the parts with respect to each other to perform a function. When you look at an outboard motor on a boat, you see the same thing. You see a purposeful arrangement of parts. Now we see that in the machinery of the cell. We see outboard motors in the cell. We see trucks in the cell, and so on. So,
but your life would be so much easier if at the end of your article you said,
less fun.
You said, if you would like to pursue this further, go to the Department of Philosophy. Go to the Department of Theology. Here the science ends.
I say that after we conclude design. I do not infer to God. And as I write, some people have approached me and said, yeah, I'm with you. I think it's intelligent, but I think it's, space aliens have visited us.
Fred Hoyle's explanation.
Exactly.
Go ahead, John.
I think the basic question here is, there are several and they're very important, is what is an explanation? That's a crucial question. And Michael cited Newton. hypothesi non fingo. His gravity, when I was taught in school, I thought the law of gravity explained gravity. And I was an adult before I discovered it explains no such thing. So that even a scientific explanation within its own terms is rarely full. It's almost never full. That's the first thing. Secondly, we admit at all kinds of levels explanations in terms of agent, like if we want a complete description of the motor car. Now, your earlier question to Michael, could God have done this? There is a sense in which God can do things any way he likes. But the issue is, how does God do it? And secondly, is his activity detectable scientifically? Now, I'm putting those words together very carefully. Not is his involvement detectable, but is it detectable in terms of science? In other words, if you set up your definition of science as restricted to the five senses,
Yes.
so that you're not, and here comes the principle, the Socratic principle, that is often violated, that the late Antony Flew saw, that when he came to conclude that there was an intelligent designer behind the universe on the basis of DNA, and they said, oh, but you can't do that. He said, I follow the evidence where it leads. And this is the clash that arises. You can either say, well, science has come to an end. It cannot answer this question. There are very few people want to say that. Or you say, science is limited. We must open the field to other kinds of questions, like the why questions of purpose, like teleology and all this kind of thing. And the underlying mistake that we're forced to think is that science and rationality are coextensive when they're not.
And also that there...
That is to say, science does not cover the full field of rationality.
No, history is a rational discipline.
And
So is
there are
philosophy.
other kinds of sciences, and this is what my PhD was about. There's historical
There's
scientific
scientific
reasoning, which is all about
abduction,
inferring back to causal, to explain causal origins. Imagine that you walk into the British Museum and you look at the Rosetta Stone, and someone says, "Well, how did those inscriptions come about?" If the archaeologist is governed by a principle that you alluded to indirectly, it's called methodological naturalism. We may only infer materialistic causes, whatever the evidence. The scientist would miss the obvious explanation. This was produced by scribes,
right,
by intelligent agents. There are distinctive indicators of the activity of intelligence, and therefore that allows us to infer. There was one of the early pioneers in the information sciences named Henry Quastler said that the creation of new information is habitually associated with conscious activity. In other words, our uniform and repeated experience affirms that there's only one type of cause that produces information. But uniform and repeated experience is the basis of all historical scientific reasoning. So there is a basis in historical scientific reasoning to infer intelligent design. There's no need or reason to limit the conclusions that we can consider in that branch of science, because
unless, and here's the bottom line for all of this, unless you presume a naturalistic worldview and imprison yourself within its confines.
That's the key issue.
That's not fair. If the evidence leads beyond a naturalistic view, you must pursue it, correct?
Why not? Why shouldn't you?
All right.
Yeah.
But why shouldn't you? That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're closing
artificially-
yourself within a prison.
All right.
Okay, now the next point that's made here deals with the systemic blinders that exist on many people, and it begins to point to an answer to that question. Why is this such a difficult chasm for people to cross intellectually, that when you see information, you can infer that it comes from an intelligent source? Let's get into this now.
All three of you strike me as, well, of course, you're rather argumentative, but all three of you strike me as rational men, and yet look at the lives you lead. Steve Meyer wrote an article on the Cambrian explosion for the Proceedings of the Biological Society at the Smithsonian Institution, and his editor was harassed and finally left the institution. Michael Behe has evoked from his colleagues at Lehigh University, which is a great university and especially strong in the sciences, a statement on their website that Dr. Behe is entitled to express his views, But we, his colleagues in the biology department, do not view them as science.
He's been disclaimed.
He's been disclaimed. Why? Academics espouse all kinds of crazy ideas. Why should these ideas, why should the challenge to Darwin and the suggestion that if there's a code, there's a coder, the suggestion of an intelligent design, evoke such singular hostility? What is going on? I'll start with John because I didn't give you the
What is going on is the domination of naturalism and materialism in the academy, which is so ironical. I'm from Oxford University. Its motto, and it's been there for a long time, is Dominus Illuminatio Mea. The people that founded the great universities of the world had no problem with the idea of an intelligent designer of the universe. But now somehow, in the academy, anybody who espouses the idea that was the foundation of modern science in the 16th and 17th centuries, arguably as a historical thesis, is out. That strikes me
and that
as
idea,
a very...
that idea is, the founding idea is?
The founding idea is, well, let me quote C.S. Lewis. Men became scientific. Why? Because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in the legislator. There it is, encapsulated. That's Whitehead's thesis, if you want it, North Whitehead. And the point is, these gentlemen here, tragically, have been subject to an anti-intellectualism that has lost the spirit that lies behind the modern science that these universities claim to teach.
It's almost too tragic to actually accept what is being said here at the closing, that there is a power dynamic that is siphoning out viewpoints that would broaden knowledge and that would actually lead to the best answers to the biggest questions that humans face on this planet. And this is what I want to suggest in this video, is that there is a special pleading that's taking place here, where, for example, if we were to go to a planet in a galaxy far, far away, and if we were to find the Rosetta Stone there, or a computer there, or a piece of art there, or a book there, or anything that contains information inside of it, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we would view that as evidence for life outside of Earth. We would say this came from somewhere. This is evidence of alien life form. We haven't seen the aliens themselves yet, but given that we're seeing something that looks like a Rembrandt painting, or something that is a novel full of information, or a computer, if we saw any of those things, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we would be extremely excited. It would probably be on the front page of every single newspaper in the world. And yet we don't apply that same standard to the information that we have found recently inside of the cell, just to use one example. But I love this video because it actually says, no, you're running up against the scientific method, and you're running up against the best answers in the pursuit of knowledge that we have, when you draw this narrow circle and say you can only go about knowing things within this narrow parameter. And if you even dare think outside of this, then you actually risk real punishment, even in a career sense. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope it was helpful in some way to some of you. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching, if you still are, and I'll see you in the next video.